Okay, so welcome. Thank you so much for coming in today to learn more about how to get into pharma faster in 2023. So I'm your host today. I am Abena Bubbers-Jones. I'm the founder of MedicFootprints and an alternative careers for Doctors Geek. And we've got a really amazing panel of doctors here today who will be talking about their experience moving into pharma. So what I'm going to do actually, because we've got some people with their cameras on, which is great, and others without their cameras on, which is absolutely fine. So what I'll do just for the first section is that, can I just ask for those of you who are not panelists just to turn off your camera for now. And what we'll do, we will be having breakout rooms later on in this session where you'd be spending some time with our panelists and asking them some of your burning questions. But for now, we're just going to focus on our panelists for this bit. If you have any questions as we go through this session, please feel free to either put that in the chat box or raise your hand and you can ask a question via audio or video. So remember, this is your time and it's your opportunity to really learn more about how you can do what it takes to actually get into pharma this year. This is what our objective is for you, and this is how we really want to support you. So yeah, let's get going. So we're going to start by some introductions. So we've got Ola, who is Founder's Associate and works remarkably on supporting the doctors and the clients at MedicFootprints. And she's going to be helping us with some of the administration of today's event. And then introducing Ricardo. Would you like to say a bit about yourself?
Sure. So hi, everybody. I'm Ricardo. I'm originally from Portugal, Lisbon, although I have been working in Switzerland for some time now. I'm in the pharmaceutical industry for 10 years, give or take now. I've held multiple positions of increasing responsibility and leadership at both national, regional, European, and global level in worldwide renowned companies such as Novartis, AstraZeneca, and Roche. More recently, I decided to kickstart my own entrepreneurial journey in the biotech field, and also as an independent business angel investor and consultant. So good to be here, and I hope I can help you guys get a job inside pharma.
Thank you. Jason.
Thanks. So my name is Jason Mystery. I am currently working at Novartis, and I look after all the pipeline products for solid tumors. So before launch, so 5 years out. Prior to that, I worked in digital medical affairs, which essentially looked after pharma and oncology, and was a medical advisor before joining. So I've been in Novartis for about just under 4 years. A clinician by background and did a bit of healthcare consultancy work as well. I'm here to sort of give back and actually help doctors transition. So I know when I was looking at this and what I need to do, and poor Abena used to get harassed by me on a regular basis, is actually the lack of information and the practical advice and what the next steps are and what it actually entails. So hopefully I can sort of cut through the noise and say this is how I did it or ought to be done. And that's kind of what you need to hear sometimes. So that's hopefully I can do that piece here. So looking forward to speaking to you all.
Brilliant. And that harassment has really paid off, clearly. So
I'm still going.
But I'm harassing you.
yeah, one way or another, it's fine. It's still waiting.
Yeah. So Adam.
Lovely to meet you all. My name is Adam Hexter. I currently work at Amgen as a senior medical manager. In my past life, I used to work as an orthopedic surgeon at UCL in the NHS. I did a PhD after that, and it was during my PhD when I realized I wanted a new challenge, and after doing some research, I settled on pharma. So delighted to tell you all today exactly how I made the transition, and since joining pharma, why I've chosen to take on further optional training in pharmaceutical medicine. Thank you.
Brilliant. I mean, that's going to be a really hot topic of discussion, and I cannot wait to delve into that. I want to ask you these questions. We're going to wait for the recording. So anyway, let's get started. As I said, housekeeping. If you do have any questions, please feel free to put that in there. chat box, or if you really want to kind of wait until you're like in a smaller room with one of our panelists, then feel free to wait for that later on in the session. So we're going to start with actually let's start with a general kind of very high level view. We know that all pharma, and correct me if I'm wrong, all pharma opportunities are in industry. So what does industry actually mean? And I'm going to ask Jitin that question.
So I guess industry to me is anything around the drug life cycle. So bringing drugs to market, and that could be, sort of looking at phase 1 to 2, depending on which company you sit at. So Novartis, for example, own the whole drug life cycle. Some companies don't. They sort of work at phase 3, phase 4. And if you're, depending on which company you are at, it is where you position yourself. So Novartis is going to own the process from phase 1 right to phase 4 launch. I think industry for me is the actual balance between medical and non-medical aspects. So, because don't forget that the slight emphasis is different around addressing the medical unmet needs, but also the commercial viability aspects. So balancing those needs. But you are essentially, as a medical advisor, the patient advocate and the patient voice within that industry. And interesting, I did a lot of reaching out and to have discussions, and this will always fit for me, just as a piece to share. And if you are asked this question, is that someone says, well, why are you in industry? What's your purpose as a medic? And it is to be a patient advocate. So that's your first and foremost answer. So, and we need that voice within pharma, because within the noise of market forecasting and financial returns, you need to be that patient advocate and actually bring purpose to why we do what we do. And that's very much in line with the culture and how that works and next steps. So that's the way I view industry, to bring challenge and actually to deliver, large impact for patients.
I think that's a really good point about being clear that you are the patient advocate. In some ways, you're closest to the actual to the ground when it comes to the clinical relevance of whatever drugs that you are developing or in the drug cycle. But just to save everyone giving that same answer in their interviews, which will get a little bit dry. Like, are there any other real value adds that doctors bring into the pharma sector beyond the obvious?
So everyone talks about the transferable skills piece, right? So I think there is, I think doctors in general have their own USPs, and we've talked about this before, right? What is your unique selling point? Each doctor, for me, has their own skill sets. And it's bringing that skill set out to understand what the challenges are for the pharma sector or the position you're applying for, and how you provide those solutions. But also just understanding the basics of what the role is you're applying for. So I've done multiple interviews, and I've just asked openly, what do you think a medical advisor does? And I've had mixed responses. So I think there's a piece around what's the culture of that particular organization? What are their values and the drivers? Does that suit to what you're trying to do as well? So, actually, if there was 10 people that said, look, we're a patient advocate, I think that for me is a big plus point, because it's not often talked about for me in interviews. It's a bit lost. And I think it's then, demonstrating what you can bring to that role as a doctor. Your problem solving skills, your analytical skills, understanding and simplification. I think that's some of the things that we take for granted as doctors. I used to, even using simple common sense. I'm a bit for profit is sat in the office, but applying simple common sense and logic to problems is quite a unique skill as doctors. And I think the simplicity in language is also something that we can bring to our commercial colleagues. So how do we translate science and data so it's applicable depending on where you sit? Or in pipeline strategy, for example, is the data relevant? Does it actually, the primary endpoints, does it meet our clinical meaningful points of efficacy? So there is that piece that we need to highlight. So that's come through your different skill sets and your different training. I've not done a PhD in the background, so I'm a clinician clearly by background, but it's just tapping into what we do as medics on an everyday basis and realizing that skill set in itself is pretty powerful, and don't undervalue it, because it's not replicated everywhere in pharma.
Thank you so much. And I think there's some really interesting points that you've made there. Either Adam or Ricardo, do you have anything else to add to what Jitin has said?
I would just add, I think when someone's worked in pharma their whole career, as many people have, they struggle to imagine what the working conditions are like in the NHS. So they're also, by employing a doctor, they're sort of employing someone with that insight as to what it's like with those healthcare professionals on the front line who they're trying to communicate with.
Thank you so much. Actually, I
Yeah,
was
just quickly, sorry,
Yeah.
Abina, just quickly to add, I think we also need to bring this into context, right? Because I mean, 20 years ago, this was not a common trend. Doctors moving into the industry. There might have been some examples of physicians doing so, but I think it's much more common now. And I think previously, in the past decades, there were a lot of well, unethical actions and behaviors also happening as part of these companies, mainly because they were only being driven by people that were non-medics, right? So I think what a medic brings into these companies, not only the clinical expertise, of course, which is really valuable, but also the ethical piece and the values that we bring together to make it I mean, still a profitable business, but in an ethical way, it's really important. So I think the values that we bring as medics is really important for these companies. And I think we have that transition over the past 20 years, a lot of medics going into the industry. We already have a very different industry nowadays versus what we had 20 or 10 years ago. And that's mainly also responsible or happened because of the transition of many medical doctors into the industry. And that's really so just putting it into perspective, the industry has already changed a lot, and the amount of and level of breakthroughs that we have had for patients has been immense, right? And that is also related with the transition of medical doctors being only clinicians or MD PhDs or MD MBAs, whatever, really adding value to the operation there. So I just wanted to add that.
And why? And I'd love to hear that. Why has it shifted in that direction? Like what? Who has or what has influenced that?
Internally, you mean, or
internally, externally, where we've seen a greater shift of doctors actually working in pharmaceutical companies and working at perhaps a higher influential level?
Right. Yeah, I think there's a couple of factors to play regarding that transition. I think one is, I mean, we were all used in our parents' generations. We were all used for listening to people that went into a career path and just sticked with it until the rest of their lives. Basically, I think that is progressively changed. So a lot of people are understanding that their skills, that their background does not exclude them to grow into different directions. And this has happened in other industries such as engineering, lawyers, all different types of areas. And I think we are only one of the remnants that have kind of still sticked exclusively with the clinical practice piece of it, you know. So if you look at the career path of engineering, of lawyers, of other professionals in different fields, they have all not limited themselves by their background. They actually leverage their background, and they added on top of their background additional skills, experiences, and further education that propelled them forward, not only in a different career path, but also bringing a new set of eyes and diversified skills in an operation. And this has happened in the pharmaceutical industry. Before, you had either mainly scientists joining the pharmaceutical industry, pure scientists, or commercial finance people, and not so much doctors. And I think now you have the opposite, right? So a lot of doctors are actually considering that they can grow so much within the industry. They have so many opportunities to grow in different directions, being commercial, being medical, being regulatory, whatever. So the potential for growth is just massive. And of course, that balance in lifestyle that sometimes we also search for, you can better find it, in my opinion, in the corporate world than in the NHS. Let's put it this way.
Yeah. Great. So actually, let's move on to like understanding the structure of pharmaceutical companies. So I forgot to mention at the beginning, everyone that's on our panel today are representing themselves and not the companies they work for, right? Just to be clear, just to be transparent. But it'd be great to just get an understanding of, you know, how pharma companies work and how that influences what a doctor should go for, what kind of career opportunity should a doctor go for. So do you want to give us a little overview of your understanding of how that works, Adam?
Yes, very happy to. I think one thing I struggled to truly comprehend when I was looking at opportunities was just the massive amount of diversity in the different companies. So you've got the ones everyone's heard of, so Pfizer, AstraZeneca, the massive big 20 companies. Then you've got mid-sized companies. So I joined a company called ASI. That's more of a sort of family feel company, mid-sized. So they are global, but they're not a giant. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you can work for biotechs, which are startups, you know, handful of people there, and they're relying on one molecule. And if that fails, the company might not be around in 6 months' time. So there's a spectrum in the size of the company. And I guess another way of categorizing them is what the company's focus is. So some companies, the really big ones, have multiple so-called therapy areas across, say, cancer, immunology, cardiovascular disease, gastroenterology, but others might be more niche and just have a smaller range of therapeutic areas or therapeutic interests.
Great, thank you. I think that's a really good overview. And tell me, what are franchises?
Well, franchises for me is not something I've heard much about in pharma, to be honest. I tend to categorize companies by biotechs or big pharma. And franchises is not something I've had much, it's not something I've come across much during my 2.5 years in pharma.
One thing maybe to help Adam out is that terminology in pharma is like going back to med school. You have to relearn everything again. There's a whole new dictionary of terms and acronyms, and even if you've been in pharma for a while, there's still people asking what acronyms are we using. So we use franchises sat within different therapy areas in Novartis. It's just a different way of determining things. But I'm sure when I move company, it'll be a different way of the same word meaning something else. So you go back to sort of going, well, hold on, what does that mean again? And then you ask this, but actually other people in the room are also thinking the same thing. So you'll be surprised when you ask those simple questions that, what does that mean again? So you'll get thanked for it. And don't be afraid to actually ask those questions, because I've done it multiple times going, okay, what does that mean? So yeah, just to point out that, and I would add just to Adam is the maybe the cross-functional piece, the team that you work with when you're in pharma. So you can sit within medical affairs, which is where most medics enter, or MedInfo is the other entry point sometimes. But within that, you've got your marketing colleagues, you've got HUR colleagues, your commercial colleagues. So what does that look like? Now you've got the digital omni-channel piece that, you know, I did as a medical piece. And it's just to say that medics, you can technically enter in any point. It's just whether that fits what you want to do, and you have the skill set to match it. So I remember I interviewed at Roche just openly, and I wanted to do the PMST training at the time, but they didn't know about it. The team I interviewed with, just as a tip, didn't understand it. The company supported it, but the team that I was looking at didn't understand, because the market access type was, how do we get drugs to the NHS? It's an interesting area of work, and it's consulting, but you've got to be careful of who you're talking to. Are they medics that understand PMST? So, you know, if it was me or Adam or even Ricardo on the panel, and you talk about PMST and you desire to do that, we would get that, because actually we know that supports it. But it's very easy that other parts of the organization or teams don't know what that is. So that's one of my learns that I learned quite quickly, that just to make it stand, just because a company says it doesn't mean that the individual you're talking to understands what you're doing, because it is quite vast.
I think that's a really good point you've raised, because it is a bit of a lottery depending on who you actually are speaking to on the day. So what advice do you have for doctors in actually managing that kind of scenario? You know what I mean?
So I always say become a stalker on LinkedIn. So actually, so it's kind of going back to your basics. Like before you even, you know, you're going to go see a patient, go back to your basics. Look at the, you know, you sometimes can understand who if you're going to interview or talk or reach out, have a look at their profile, have a look at where they sit. Google is great nowadays. I think prior to what Ricardo was saying, the game has shifted, right? The information's there, the culture of the company's there, the ethos of what they're doing. So just understand who your audience is and who you're engaging with, and then the type of work that they're doing. So I think the other piece that happens in functions, and if you talk broader, is that people will focus on what they're doing. But medical affairs, you have to be a bit like a Swiss Army knife. You're kind of all over, you know, you're supporting different functions. I think that's the other piece to be aware of. So when I was looking at it, medical affairs for me sort of ticked a lot of boxes around the cross-functional challenges, how I could support different functions. It's not quite the same. You're not doing the same monotonous piece. So I could be doing strategy one piece. I could be then looking at clinical trials. Next piece of them could be sorting out some of the commercial bits, or some of the signatory pieces that it's a bit of boring, but it's a bit of a tick box exercise to get you through. So yes, I think do your due diligence. Look them up on LinkedIn, do Google search, what they do, what are their interests. I sort of also looked at where their journey was. So what are the synergies between how they got to industry? Because the other piece that's been nice, once you connect with the right people, people are always happy to give advice. I always ask for advice as opposed to, can you help me get into the industry? That sort of also is a bit of a pro tip. So I think people are happy to talk, as you can tell. But I think it's just seeing the similarities, and people have found their way into the industry really multiple different ways. There's no set way of doing this. I don't know if the other guys would agree. There's no one way of getting into the industry. And I think that's the key bit to remember.
There's no one way, but the question is, what is the easiest way? For doctors who are like, right, I just want to get my foot in the door, and once I'm in, things do get easy. So obviously the, you know, doctors go in at different stages in their careers, an early, later stage. I'm sure you'll probably all have different opinions on this, but based on your experience and knowledge of the market and where it stands now and where it is going as well, looking forward, what would you advise doctors to be really focusing on in actually just getting in?
So I'll go and then I'll let the guys add their piece. But from my perspective, it's going back to the fundamentals of understanding the role that you're looking at, understanding where you want to go, understanding what your strengths and weaknesses are. And I think it's a bit of reflection on where we are as doctors. And I've talked to a lot of doctors about it, and I've always gone back to what are your motivators and drivers of getting into the industry? Because sometimes I've spoken to doctors who left the industry, and why did you leave? Because it wasn't the right fit. It wasn't what I'm looking for. What is actually the expectation? I think that's important, because then the rest of it becomes a bit easy in terms of, cool, I know what I've identified for. I know what I'm going for. I can narrow my search down, and I can start to then pick out key people that work in that area and ask for this advice piece. Get your CV right, so demonstrating your skills, because a medical CV for me is different from an industry-led CV. So getting your skills at the top, and that's a bit of a learn as well, getting it down to 1 or 2 pages. And if you're someone that's senior as a medical consultant, you can have reams of stuff versus someone that hasn't. Also,
what kind of, sorry, just to interrupt. So what kind of entry points are there that they can actually get into?
Yeah, so I've MedInfo is one, medical affairs is the other. Medical advisors, I think, is a low-hanging fruit, but to get into that route, there still needs to be an ask or a want from the company. Say, look, we need someone as an expertise in this particular area. But if you're a medic that has digital capabilities, or you're a medic that has other sort of USP selling points, and look, the commercial aspect, I've seen medics come in by the marketing route, which is really odd, but actually they've landed well, done really well, and escalated across. So it's a hard question to ask. The easiest way in is to identify what what you want to do, and then sort of marry up your interest, your what you enjoy and what you want to do, and that then becomes I think that you sort of takes away some of the struggles of where do we go, how do we do it, because you'll find circles of people that have similar interests and say, okay, let's offer you up. Networking, everyone loves networking. This type of event is probably cool, because that becomes an easier route in as well. Every conversation is an interview. That's the other piece I'd say.
Sorry, say that again.
Every conversation with anyone in the industry is an interview, because people remember you.
It's an interview. Oh yeah, absolutely. It's always two-way as well, because it's a really good opportunity for you to find out more about the culture of the organization you could potentially be working with, and see whether it is a good fit for you. So absolutely. Ricardo, have you got anything else to add to that? What's the easiest entry points these days, and looking to the future?
Yeah, I mean, It's complex because it has already been pointed out. I mean, there's no one unique way of getting in. But if we strip everything else down, I think the easiest way for you to get in is in an area that is very connected with your daily clinical expertise.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say that you're an oncologist focused in breast cancer, right? So just kind of do a mapping exercise out there of which companies are present in the field, which companies have commercialized products in that specific field, which ones have products in the pipeline, and there's your most direct entry points. Absolutely, right? And of course, you can still go into commercial directly, from clinic directly to commercial or to market access. But I would say, again, the first probable easiest entry point would be in medical department. And within medical department, you can range from medical affairs to clinical development. Also, I think there's a piece here which is important to differentiate, which is where do you want to start your career? Do you want to start your career locally in an affiliate, or do you want to start your career in pharma at a global level? Because the level of capabilities that you need for one versus the other are totally different. But again, just replying very directly to your question, focus on what has been your clinical expertise so far, where the therapy areas that you're most comfortable with, and map those companies out that are present in those fields and just go for it. That's the easiest point of entry.
I think actually, Ricardo, that's some really useful insights and a really great segue into local versus global opportunities for doctors. So one of the things that I was shared with me recently is that in most pharma opportunities, you usually, depending on the size of the company, obviously, but with the larger companies, you're usually part of a global team. So could you give us an overview of the differences between like the local and global experience working in pharma as a doctor?
Yeah, so I mean, the level of diversity of things that you can do within the medical department of a local affiliate, they are very broad in essence. And that's why the majority of the positions in the local affiliates are focused in medical affairs, because it's a bridge function between commercial, market access, medical, regulatory, and all of that, right? But actually, to the point that Jiren made previously of some of the medics going directly into marketing, the majority of the marketing messages out there, for them to really resonate with medics in the clinic, they need, so every good marketer needs a good medic by his side, right? And this is, if you think if you kind of branch out with a helicopter view of what the local affiliate companies do, if we simplify it, they're fully focused on, the whole operation is fully focused on maximizing the commercial potential of a specific drug or a set of drugs in a therapy area in that country. That's what you're contributing to. And of course, impacting patients in the process, right? But holistically, that's what you're doing from different sides: medical, regulatory, commercial, market access, and so on. So I think they're all coming together in a congregated strategy to make that happen. But if you kind of have the ballpark scenario, you're basically trying to, you're contributing to the maximization of the commercial opportunity in that country, right? Mm-hmm. If you're working at a global level, and the set of capabilities that you need to work at a global level is different, ranging from, are you actually going to join a pharmaceutical company R&D team, product development, clinical development experience? The level of capabilities that you need there and the level of experience in clinical research is totally different. And also ranging from which type of experience. Have you been a PI or part of an investigator team that has been doing phase 1 trials, or phase 2, or phase 3? Those are totally different set of skill sets that you need to have in mind when you go into clinical development. Usually the traditional, or the most easiest way, if you're not coming from a pharmacology background, if you come from a pharmacology background, your easiest way in is probably the intersection between PK/PD and phase 1, first in human trials. If you're coming more from a clinical experience in a specific therapy area field, such as oncology or neurodegenerative disorders. Maybe you have been part of some phase 3 trials as part of your hospital. So again, it's all coming back to leverage, understand what your experience is, and leverage that experience as much as possible to the operation of the job that you're applying to. That's really important, right? And again, medical affairs at global level is also very different than working for medical affairs locally. Medical affairs globally is responsible to do a bunch of things, but you basically have to be at the intersection of the global clinical development team and be ready to step in once that phase 3 readout comes, and you need to start pre-launch activities, disease awareness campaigns, all of those things at a global level, right? So you need to work very hand in hand with all the affiliates around the world.
Sure. Thank you so much for those insights, Ricardo. I think it's really interesting I think what's coming through for me in general is that the opportunities in pharma are so diverse, depending on the department you work in or the people you work with, let alone the companies, let alone the countries, you name it. So it is about really understanding, you know, to the detail who you're applying for, what they're interested in, and whether that matches your skill set on what you want to do. And actually, one of the questions that comes up quite a lot is, you know, considering the experience that doctors have already developed, how do they then translate that effectively, say, on their CV or in the conversations that they're having to say, I'm a really great fit for this role? I mean, that moves actually to our next section, which is on, you know, actually applying and getting an interview. And I think Adam's probably the one that's done this the most recent. So Adam, do you want to tell me a little bit more about how you prepared yourself to A, applying, and B, actually going into an interview to get your current job?
Yes, I'll be very happy to. I think just talking chronologically then, so my situation was I was out of training doing a PhD, but I know I didn't want to go back to my career in orthopedics, so I had to figure out what I wanted to do next. And it was actually one of my friends who said to me, have you heard of medical affairs? So I looked into medical affairs and I thought it looked quite interesting. And the best thing I did, I don't get royalties for this book at all, but I read a book called Beyond the Ward. You can find it on Amazon. It basically talks you through an A&E registrar's experience of going from clinic to... Yes, it's a great book. And why it's good is because it makes you feel, it normalizes that feeling you have when you're thinking to yourself, oh, I've worked so hard to get here, surely I can't leave. But so it took me about 3 months to realize, no, actually it was fine to leave. It's a perfectly normal thing to change a career path. And then the next big tip, I think it was mentioned earlier by Jitin, but you need to get on LinkedIn. It's an absolute must. It's where you see where all the jobs are. And the key thing you can do on LinkedIn is network with recruiters. So how I got in was I reached out to a recruiter, let him know I was interested, and basically I plodded on with my PhD for 6 months. 6 months later, he got in touch with me and saying, oh, this job has come up at this company, I think you'd be a good fit. And he put me forward, and then and actually I didn't get the first job I interviewed for at that company, but another job came up and they gave it to me shortly afterwards. So
I'll just ask and just interrupt you in that process, because a lot of people do skim through it, but actually the detail is quite important. And I think it's really important just to really understand. So when you spoke to this recruiter, how did you know what would be a good fit for you?
So I used to work in orthopedics, so I told him there's no natural place for me in pharma. So for me, that's a strength. I can literally just say my transferable skills of working under pressure, working in a team, and apply that to any job. So some people restrict their recruiters, or I'm only interested in jobs in oncology or gastroenterology. I pretty much said any job that would interview me, I am open for. And I told him, I'm looking to move straight into medical affairs rather than working in clinical research, because that's to go back to the previous question, in my opinion, an easier route in, but it also means you're on a ward still, on a rota, and you don't get the sort of perks as you might get in a commercial medical affairs position.
And no, thank you. I think that's really, really useful insight to say actually you're open to a lot to a lot of things, but you also had some specifics there. And when it came to them putting you forward for a job, I don't know if you understand how the recruiter works, and I think this is a really important message for everyone who's listening about recruiters. They can be your best friends when the right job is there for you, but they are not working for you because they get paid by the pharma companies. So I think it's great that an opportunity did come up for you and like you express your interest. But remember, you know, if you do work with a recruiter, they're working for the companies, not for you, and they're not searching for opportunities for you. That's just unfortunately how it works. But it's great that that did work for you. So can you tell us more about how, what was it that actually got you the interview? So was it your CV? Was it anything else that stood out to the hiring managers?
Yeah, I think good question. So when you're speaking with a recruiter, your interview's almost started, because they basically want to see, is this person going to be able to sell themselves at interview? Do they know what they're talking about? So I'm sure we'll touch on it later, but do some background reading, know a bit about the industry, know the common terms. And then in terms of how to get, I think it's, as I said, you're selling yourself to the recruiter. So you sort of say what your USP is. So for me, it was that I was a medic with a PhD, and therefore I was keen to work in a scientific role such as medical affairs. For other people, it might be, I can see Ricardo's done an MBA, they might have a business background, and they're going to be a medic with a business background, which will be their USP. So you just need to think of your USP and really convince the recruiter companies will be interested in that.
That's a really important point. Just remember, the recruiter's your interviewer. It's the first stage of your interview right there. So I think that's a really, really great selling point. And then how did that compare to when you actually went in for an interview? How did you prepare for that? Well,
I was very fortunate in that my recruiter was fantastic. So I really really took on as much from him as possible. So he was able to give me some coaching on how to approach the first interview. I think the key things to understand is about the role, what they're looking for, because therefore when you're speaking with the hiring manager, you can really tailor your answers to that specific role. And then they tell you the process. So the first interview was sort of an informal chat, not much preparation needed. The second interview is the real killer interview, where they normally get you down to 3 or 4 people and they ask you to do a presentation, and then the best candidate goes forward to have, I think, what's called the godfathering interview, where you basically have a one-to-one with the senior director in the company, and they make sure you're not an alien from Mars or anything, and you can speak to people. So it's the second interview that's the key one typically, but processes do vary company to company.
Thank you so much. Jiten, have you got anything to add, either based on your experience getting into Novartis or your experience as an interviewer?
Never heard the last one we called the Godfather one, but that's interesting. I'm learning lots as well. So I think just the other piece about recruiters, so 2 points. Companies are using less recruiters at the moment to get jobs in. So LinkedIn does become your way in because companies are advertising directly. And actually what's happening is some of the recruiters are moving into the industry. So that's one. The recruiters for me are your screening tool. So I used to send my CVs out to a lot of different recruiters to get different feedback. And it's interesting to see what they're looking for, what comes back to you. And work on your elevator pitch. So as medics, we're not very good at selling ourselves. So we're not very good at that, talking about our achievements. There are, I think we're just humble people. I'm just going to talk about myself here. But the point is that you need to be able to sell an elevator pitch. What would that look like for you? What are the key things you want to get across that the recruiter will take away? So and I think for the interview process, we do here is a presentation. So preparing for a presentation, what are your thoughts on, it could be a broad topic or a small topic. So the latest one was around what are the challenges in pharmaceuticals as a top line, and see what your thoughts are. Or there are other examples. I think in Pfizer, it's, can you review this paper? So it's knowing the role that you're going for, potentially the type of questions that might come up. So as to what Adam said, you usually do have this soft introduction, a screener interview, then it's around those sort of more technical focused type questions, and then the Godfather one, as you put it, at the end, which I quite like. I might pinch that one, Adam. So yeah, so for me, it's about making sure, and you go back to your basics, your STAR techniques, your what did you learn, how did you adapt, what did you develop, so the things that we often don't think are important, just go back to those fundamentals. I think will put you in good stead. And also research the pipeline. So if you are going for a job and you don't know what the company is doing, that also doesn't look good. So go a bit beyond perhaps what you'd be looking for, but we can talk about that. So.
Thank you so much for that, Jason. And yes, learning how to sell yourself is one of the first key masterclasses we did. It was our last masterclass. So if you're on this and you haven't watched that masterclass, you can get that from us. Or if you're an MF Premium member, you will be able to get access to that. Or if you're a Doctors in Industry Incubator member, that's part of the program. But the reason why it was one of the first masterclasses was because it's probably the most important, because it is about any opportunity you're going for in industry, you need to learn how to effectively sell yourself for that opportunity. And like a lot of things, it's a skill that you just need to learn. And once you learned it, it will make things, your journey, so much more easier. So Ola is saying, shall we aim? So she's saying, well, shall we aim to get into the breakout at 8 or 8:10? So I think what we'll be doing, we've still got a few more questions to cover. We're going to be aiming for breakout sessions at 8 o'clock. So that's in the next 18 minutes where you'll get to address some more questions from the panelists. So yeah, I know we've got a few questions that have come through the chat room. Well, let's actually just start from a question from the chat room, which is, Samin, are there any useful courses or previous experiences required for a pharmacovigilance role? So has anyone here got experience in pharmacovigilance?
I mean, not specifically, but usually pharmacovigilance roles are very connected with medical monitor roles. And usually what they would like, what they would like there of a medic is clinical expertise managing patients in a specific disease, because you're going to be reviewing a lot of adverse events and the causality of those adverse events, or the possibility of causality of those adverse events. So usually they'd like to, as much as possible, to have people working in pharmacovigilance that would have clinical expertise in that area. Now, having said that, you can also do pharmacovigilance roles without being an expert clinically in that area. But I think pharmacovigilance courses, there's a bunch out there, and it's quite easy. And I think that's actually a good point, because a lot of people when they want to enter pharma, they want to go to the sexy medical affairs area, which is more broad in essence, and not so many people would like to go for pharmacovigilance roles. So that could actually be a good entry point for you as well, if that is something that is of interest to you, and maybe you have less competition versus medical affairs. So yeah, it's a good point.
Actually, but I was quite curious as to why is it less popular?
Yeah, I think it's less popular just for the fact that it's more operational, right? It's less strategic, and you don't deal so much with different partners within different functional departments. Although you still do, and again, pharmacovigilance roles locally are very different than pharmacovigilance roles globally. I would say, generally speaking, that pharmacovigilance roles globally have a much bigger importance on the global development program of a specific compound, and you're more integrated with within the team rather than the local ones. But I think that's why. I think it's because it's more operational rather than.
Okay, you're nodding, Jason.
Yeah, I mean, so I was offered MSL roles, pharmacovigilance role, MedInfo roles, but I was quite adamant around how I'd enter. And I think it's down to your personality type and going back to what do you enjoy, because it is very technical heavy. It's, operational. It's the stuff that I personally enjoy. I enjoy challenging strategy and sort of customer facing or paid CP engagement. So there are people that enjoy that. So there are, some of our trialists who want to go in that path. Great. I think that's probably the beauty of pharma in terms of it's quite diverse. So I think it goes back to what is it you enjoy, your USP, and then the role, does it fit what you would like to do from an everyday perspective? I remember as a medic, I was always told, what would you like to do from an everyday perspective? And if I'm honest, pharmacovigilance, even though it's part of what I need to do for medical affairs, it is probably the less of bits that I personally enjoy. But there are some people I know that absolutely love it. So it's what is it that you enjoy? And then the only way you can really do that is actually maybe reaching out and having conversations. But it's not my area, if I'm honest.
Brilliant.
I would just add very quickly that actually, I mean, there's pharmacovigilance roles out there that are really well paid, given the importance of what they need to do, although it's more technical and more operational. So it's definitely something, again, I agree with Jitin. I mean, if depends on who you are and which type of work you want to do, but don't discard that as a possibility, because it's also a very good learning experience. Even it could be just an entry point for you and then you move into something else, or it could be a full-fledged career in pharmacovigilance.
And just to maybe add on that, so my brother's a pharmacist by background, and he does this, and he does quality assurance, which is another thing that he's very well paid, because there's only very few people that can do it well. So it's just, what do you enjoy? And I think if you enjoy what you do, you will be ultimately paid well for your skills and services. But I am jealous of how well he's doing, but that's because I've just chosen a very different path. But that's life, right? So yeah.
Brilliant. What's his name?
Kartik. He's in. We shouldn't tell him where he is, but he's doing quite well for himself, so he's happy. But he's a pharmacist, slightly different.
Awesome. Well, it seems like you're developing quite a powerful family within the pharma industry, so can only be a plus. Our next question is from Abby, who has asked the transition. So a lot of doctors, I know that if they're not successful in getting into pharma and say medical affairs, they'll go for a clinical research type role. So the question is, how easy is it to transition from that kind of role into particularly a commercial role in pharma? Can anyone answer that question?
I know a few people who tried to get into medical affairs and ended up spending several years in the CRO as a clinical research physician. I'm pleased to say all of them, after applying several times, did get medical affairs roles, and they're all flying now. So I think it's like anything with pharma, you just need to back yourself. There will be 3 months of settling into a new environment, but if you really want to do it, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to. I think it is easier moving from a clinical research background as an interim rather than straight from the NHS, because you probably know a bit more about the industry and the industry language. So I would say it's easier than straight from the NHS, but still depends on you and your drive.
Brilliant. And talking about straight from the NHS, we get a lot of questions from both junior doctors, consultants, regs alike, as to what are the best entry points for them. Do you have, is there like a minimum grade that you need to be to get a job in pharma? Is there a maximum grade that you need to be to get in pharma? Like what how would you answer that question?
Yeah, I'm happy to take this one, because if you want to go down the route of pharmaceutical medicine specialty training, which is the accredited program in pharma, which is optional, that leads to CCT, just like any other medical specialty, you need to have done a minimum of 2 years after FY2. So if you want to do that, you need to have done at least 2 years after FY2. I do know one person who didn't do that amount of years and is now got in via the clinical research physician route. So yeah, I would say typically companies look for at least 2 years after FY2. I'm not sure if the others agree.
I'll probably say the same, because I think when you're, to the early points the guys made, you're looking for clinical representation depending on where you sit. So it's your experience. So if you are, I don't know, you could be an FY1 with massive digital experience for omnichannel, for example. But that for me is your drive, your digital orientated market. You could then move in because of what we're doing medically. But if you're looking for clinical expertise, and we're launching a breast drug, for example, then we're going to look for someone that has the credibility, but the network, and then can actually, give us the insights and that clinical grounding that you probably need. Because even for me, as an anaesthetist, I'm removed from the clinical aspect, so you're going to need those insights. So it varies on where we are and what you're doing. So, but yeah, I think it's right to say a minimum of 4 years, would say, or 2 years. It's a bit hit and miss.
What I would say is I think companies aren't very good at distinguishing if someone spent 6 months in a training program or 6 years. So if you get into specialty training, I think you can pretty much leave at any time in your training, and they will respect that as if you've been there for several years, particularly if you get your membership exam.
So no, I love that, and actually that leads us on to talking about you again, Adam. You've done the diploma in pharmaceutical medicine and you're in training. So tell us more about your decision making as to why you decided to go and do the diploma, why the value add for training, and obviously we know that training isn't 100% necessary to get into pharma. So I'd love to hear a bit more about that.
Yeah, thank you. I guess it comes down to being pushed and being pulled. So I was generally pulled to pharma because I thought it was a better fit for my skill set than what I was currently doing in orthopedics. I am very scientific, and I felt leaving orthopedics was going to be right for me in the long term in terms of my happiness. So I got into pharma, settled into the job, and I realized that I still had a bit of unfinished business with medical training. I didn't leave orthopedics because I hated training, and I left it because I didn't see it as being a good fit for me. So when I heard there was pharmaceutical medicine training, which led to a CCT equivalent, it appealed to me. It's optional. So one of the perks of it is it counts as your annual appraisal. And you learn all about the different areas of pharma. So as part of it, you get exposure to drug regulation, drug safety, drug discovery, clinical development, medical affairs. So it allows you to see your blind spots, and it helps prepare you for the diploma of pharmaceutical medicine, which is the equivalent in surgery to say the MRCS, or in medicine of PACES. So yeah, it's optional. Companies don't necessarily ask for it. That's more favorable with UK companies, so GSK and AstraZeneca. But it's entirely up to you. If you are sick of portfolios and don't want to do anything away from your day job, it's not for you. But if you've not developed an aversion to those, I would say look into PMST, and there's plenty on the Faculty of Pharmaceutical Medicine website. And
you were just saying about the international value of the diploma. What does that look like for doctors who are wanting to work overseas?
So I think the diploma is recognized by companies internationally, so it can help with when you're applying to global roles or international companies, more so than say PMST, which is a UK training program. I know there are similar programs in other countries such as Switzerland, I believe. So it depends what you're after. Are you after showing that you've got you've developed a knowledge which can pass an exam, or do you want to be considered a board certified pharmaceutical physician? So it depends what you're after.
Ricardo, pharmaceutical medicine training in Switzerland. Tell us a little bit more about what you know about that.
Sure. So basically, I think it's similar to what the PMST in the UK does. The main difference is that you have a modular program during a 2-year time frame, where you learn from individuals. So all the professors and people invited to speak there are actually people that are working in the industry at a very broad level. Some are still in big pharma, others are in biotech, others have put together their own startups and exited the companies, others are in regulatory agencies. So all to make the point that you actually learn from people that are actually doing the job on a daily basis, right? And I think that's also a very good advantage of the program in Switzerland. So as opposed to the PMST, which is, I guess, more restrictive. I think the options in Switzerland are very good, not only from a time frame perspective, but also that you learn from a very international faculty to begin with that are very experienced. And then you sit an exam after those 2 years, which has an oral, has a multiple choice questionnaire, an oral and a written examination, and then you can have the registration as a pharmaceutical medicine specialist as well there. The key thing in industry and in pharma, I would say, is that there are no rules. So if you're actually thinking about doing any of these programs and expecting that that is going to give you an edge, well, certainly it will, because you're going to learn a lot of things in the process. But you can similarly have someone that has not gone through any of those programs and actually know the same amount or even more than you, because they basically learned on the job and by experience. So there's no rules.
It's just like doing an MBA or just being an entrepreneur and getting on with it. Yeah,
Right.
It's the same kind of thing, and it's quite difficult for us as doctors to kind of get around that concept. That
Right.
you know, there is actually a huge amount of value from the vocational way forward rather than the actual qualification way forward. And there's benefits of both. And as I say, there aren't any rules, as you just said as well. The rules are there aren't any rules. So yeah, so anyway, that takes us nearly to 8 o'clock. I've just got one question that came through before this session, which is there an advantage from doing PMST versus completing internal medicine training when applying for jobs in pharma? And how does that affect your career progression?
Yeah, I'm happy to take this one. I would say not. I would say in terms of getting in, having completed your internal training would be favorable. However, not essential. The fact you've started, it's enough. And then basically, if you move across to pharma and you're relatively junior from the NHS, you might consider PMST. If you're senior and you've completed internal training, those people tend not to do PMST because they've already CCT'd or closed. So I think they're equivalent and it doesn't make any major difference. But if you're in a therapy area, say cardiology, and you've become a consultant in cardiology, you could argue that's even more favorable for you. But I think it will come down to the company and the hiring manager.
Okay, brilliant. So before we move into breakout rooms, we do have some more questions we're going to cover, which include how to find and uncover opportunities that are not advertised, exploring how to test the waters in a practical way before you commit to a fully employed job. So Ola's going to arrange some breakout rooms. Just while she's doing that, I just want to tell you a little bit more about our Doctors in Industry Incubator. So if you are applying to Pharma this year, the incubator is designed to help doctors get to industry faster. The reality is, it is a challenge. It is a bit of a different structure and framework. And it is a 12-month flexible program for busy doctors to help you really to navigate through the networking, the applying, the interviews, the positioning of yourself, and generally the actual transition. So once you've got the job, it's the transitioning over into industry and sustainably and developing a structure and framework that works for you. So we only soft launched it last month or so. We've already got 5 members and it's growing. So if you are interested, please go and apply on medicfootprints.org/industry. The huge bit of value for you is that you will get access to mentors like these. Hopefully some of the mentors will be these people, but you will get those insider information and support in your personal journey, because it can be quite lonely and really, really stressful when you feel like you're doing it completely on your own. So basically we are providing you a massive team of a team people who is 100% behind you on that journey. So to find out more, just go to medicfootprints.org/industry. So Ola, breakout rooms. So these breakout rooms is really to give you an opportunity to have a smaller group discussion So get your cameras on and get your mics on with our panelists. You'll have about 15 minutes. If you get into a room and no one's talking about anything, I've advised our mentors to basically answer the question, one piece of advice that I offer all doctors entering pharma is, right? But if you've got some questions ready to go, then feel free to discuss that with your panelist. I'll hand it over to Ola.
I'm going to move you guys into breakout rooms now. I'll assign each panelist to one of the breakout rooms, and then I will move in between them just to make sure that everything is okay.